The Chicago Blackhawks won the NHL draft lottery on Monday, and now they have the chance to select Connor Bedard first overall, which they obviously will do. If you think otherwise, you're just plain stupid. They will not pass on a generational talent like Connor Bedard, but I still see people online thinking Connor will be a bust because of his size. Is 5 inches enough? I guess it is. Today I'm going to be putting Connor Bedard back in the 90s against the rough and tough Rock'em Sock'em Don Cherry DVD. He's going to be in the 90s. He will be playing against legends like Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky. Maybe he will be better than everybody else because he'll just be more talented, or maybe he will get absolutely crushed because of his size. So Connor is obviously going to start out on Chicago in the 90s. He's on the second forward line at an 86 overall, and he does have some talent around him like Jeremy Roenick at a 90 overall. This Chicago team is a lot better than the current Chicago team that Connor will be going to next season, so hopefully we can win a couple Stanley Cups here. He's 18 years old, 85 overall. He obviously has shock and awe as his own ability. If you enjoy videos like this, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and make sure you turn notifications on so you don't miss a single upload. So it turns out the Chicago Blackhawks are actually the best team in all of hockey. They would finish first in the entire NHL with a 61-15-6 record. Bedsy would have an amazing rookie year, 53 goals and 98 points. I mean, we are in the 90s, so expect the scoring numbers to be very high. Gretzky obviously would have the most goals and points in the entire NHL. I mean, he had 80 goals. Holy shit. Followed by Brian Trottier, Yari Curry, Mario Lemieux, and Jaromir Jagr. Bedsy would finish third in the entire NHL for goals with 53. I mean, he was far behind Lemieux and Gretzky, but still, third place, not bad. Paul Coffey would have the most points by any defenseman with 90, followed by Ray Bourque. Ed Belfour would have the most wins by any goaltender, followed by Marty Brodeur and Chris Osgood. Shout out Chris Osgood, man. He was one of the last goaltenders to wear that old style of mask. I remember him on the Red Wings when I was a kid. He was absolutely goated. Felix Potvin would have the most shutouts by any goaltender with 9, followed by Belfour and Rudy. Kelly Rudy, I know who he is. He's on Hockey Night in Canada with Kevin Bieksa and that snake Ron McLean. And here's what our year 1 playoff matchups look like. Chicago is going to be up against the Dallas Stars in round number 1. Dallas would end up sweeping us in round number 1. Not a good start for Connor Bedard's postseason career. And the Red Wings would go on to win the Stanley Cup as they beat Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, and the Pittsburgh Penguins in the Stanley Cup final. Steve Yzerman would have the most points by any player in the playoffs, followed by Sergei Fedorov. Wayne Gretzky is in fact him. He would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. The Norris would go to Paul Coffey. Connor Bedard would take home the Calder in his rookie season as the best rookie in the 90s. The Conn Smythe would go to Stevie Y, baby. The Yzer plan. And the Selke to Trevor Linden. Connor Bedard now is a 90 overall, and he's on the first line. Tony Amate is a 95 overall, and this team is very stacked. I mean, we won 61 games last season. We should have not got swept in the very first round. Hopefully this season we can go on a very deep playoff run. Connor Bedard, you are the new captain of the Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago would yet again have an amazing regular season, but would be topped by the Detroit Red Wings with a 61-18-3 record. Man, after that, our division is trash. We would end up finishing third in the entire NHL, only behind the LA Kings and the Red Wings. Connor would have another great season, 52 goals, 110 points. Yet again, Gretzky would have the most goals and points in the entire NHL. He had 135 points, followed by Brett Hall, Luc Robitaille, Connor Bedard, and Ray Bourque. Connor Bedard would yet again finish third in the scoring race for goals, only behind Brett Hall and Wayne Gretzky. I'm sorry to tell you, Connor, but 52 is not going to cut it. Not when Wayne Gretzky's in the NHL. Ray Bourque would have an amazing season. He led all defensemen in points with 109, followed by Paul Coffey and Chris Chelios. Ed Belfour would have the most wins by any goaltender with 48. Chris Osgood would tie for the most shutouts by any goaltender with 7, along with Mike Vernon. And this is what the year 2 playoff matchups look like. Chicago is going to be facing Toronto in round number 1. For a second year in a row, we were swept, this time in the second round by the Red Wings. And the Pittsburgh Penguins would go on to win the Stanley Cup as they beat Calgary in 6 games in the Stanley Cup final. Mario Lemieux would have the most points in the playoffs with 28, followed by Brian Trottier, Ryan Francis, and Scott Niedermayer. Wayne Gretzky is the greatest player of all time. Yet again, he would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. Paul Coffey would take home another Norris. Mario Lemieux would take home the Conn Smythe. Connor Bedard now is a 91 overall, and this team's absolutely stacked. There's no reason we should be getting swept in back-to-back postseasons. Chicago would yet again finish second place in their division, only behind the Red Wings, but this time they only finished 1 win above us and only 1 point above us. We would go 58-18-6, which was the third best record in the entire NHL, only behind the Red Wings and the Penguins, who won 67 games. Are you kidding me? Oh my god, just give them the Stanley Cup at this point. I will guarantee you there's not a team that is going to beat these Pittsburgh Penguins. Connor Bedard would put up 54 goals and 115 points. Yet again, Wayne Gretzky leads the entire NHL in points with 124, followed by Jaromir Jagr, Brett Hall, Connor Bedard, and Luc Robitaille. Brett Hall would just go absolutely off this season. 67 goals, leads the entire NHL, followed by Mario Lemieux, Joe Sakic, Wayne Gretzky, and Connor Bedard. Paul Coffey leads all defensemen in points yet again, this time with 112, followed by Ray Bourque and Chris Chelios. Ed Belfour continues to dominate the win category for goaltenders, this time leading the entire NHL in wins with 52. He would also tie for the most shutouts. It would be a four-way tie, and we are going to be playing the St. Louis Blues in round number 1. And just like that, the Chicago Blackhawks have made the Stanley Cup final, but the bad news is we have to play the 67-win Pittsburgh Penguins. Well, I'm just glad we got here. I do not expect to win this, but if we do, Connor Bedard is the GOAT. And somehow the Chicago Blackhawks are Stanley Cup champions as they beat the 67-win Pittsburgh Penguins in the Stanley Cup final. Connor Bedard can finally call himself a Stanley Cup champion, and he can say he beat Mario Lemieux in the Stanley Cup final. Your Conn Smythe winner is Connor Bedard, Bedsy baby, the toe drag release Bedsy show. And here he comes, the captain of the Chicago Blackhawks, Connor Bedard, coming to lift the Stanley Cup for the first time in his career. He is a Stanley Cup champion, and nobody can say otherwise. We are now witnessing the Connor Bedard show, baby. In the playoffs, Connor Bedard would have 15 goals and 25 points in 22 games. Connor Bedard would take home the Ted Lindsay and the Hart Trophy. Brett Hall would take home the Maurice Richard, and Wayne Gretzky would take home the Art Ross. Paul Coffey with another Norris. Conn Smythe obviously would go to Bedsy. The Vezina to Ed Belfour. Connor Bedard now is a 93 overall. Yet again, the Chicago Blackhawks would win 58 games. We would go 58, 18, and 6, which was not even good enough for first in our own division. St. Louis would take the cake with 61 wins. Connor Bedard would have his best season yet, 68 goals and 124 points. Connor would have the most goals and points in the entire NHL with 124, followed by Wayne Gretzky, Luc Robitaille. He would also have the most goals in the entire NHL with 68, followed by Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux. Ray Bourque would have the most points by any defenseman with 95, followed by Paul Coffey and Desjardins. Ed Belfour would continue his absolute tear. He would have 50 wins this season, which was the most by any goaltender. Martin Brodeur would have 10 shutouts though. Yeah, he's probably winning the Vezina. Here are our Year 4 playoff matchups. We are up against Detroit in round number 1. We would end up losing in the second round to the best team in the NHL, which is the St. Louis Blues, in 5 games. And they will go on to win the Stanley Cup as they beat Martin Brodeur and the New Jersey Devils in 6 games. Connor Bedard would have 8 goals and 17 points in the playoffs. Connor Bedard is the new sheriff in town, as he would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy. Paul Coffey with his 4th straight Norris. The Conn Smythe would go to Brendan Shanahan. As I called it, Martin Brodeur would take home the Vezina. Connor Bedard is still a 93 overall. Chicago would have yet again a great regular season. This time they would have 63 wins. Montreal would also have 60 wins. Bedard would absolutely bust his nut. All over the NHL, he would score 71 goals and have 130 points. That is insane. He would have the most goals and points in the entire NHL with 130, followed by Jaromir Jagr, Wayne Gretzky, Marcus Naslund, and Mario Lemieux. For goals, it was not even close. He had a 10-goal lead on second place, which was Wayne Gretzky, followed by Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr. Desjardins would actually have the most points by any defenseman in the entire NHL with 99, followed by Paul Coffey. Ed Belfour is the greatest goalie of all time. He would have the most wins in the entire NHL yet again, followed by Patrick Waugh and Grant Fuhr. Curtis Joseph would have the most shutouts in the entire NHL with 7. And this is our Year 5 playoff matchups. We are going to be playing the Vancouver Canucks in round 1. We would end up losing to Dallas in 7 games in the 3rd round of the playoffs. And the Philadelphia Flyers would go on to win the Stanley Cup as they sweep Dallas in the Stanley Cup final. Connor would have 13 goals and 24 points in the playoffs. Connor Bedard now is the greatest player of all time. He would take home the Ted Lindsay, the Maurice Richard, the Art Ross, and the Hart Trophy for his 2nd straight season. Absolute clean sweep on the awards. Desjardins would take home the Norris. Recchi would take home the Conn Smythe. Belfour would yet again take home the Vezina. That's gonna do it for this video, boys. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you turn notifications on so you don't miss a single upload. And remember, don't be silly. Wrap your willy.
It's the Bedsy Show, baby.